Why? Why do you think that you need to have that? Do you think that that's what you have to have in order to retire? Do you think that that's what you have to have in order for your goals to happen? Let's sit down and have more of the why conversation so we can get to the how conversation. Because at the end of the day, you could have millions of dollars and be completely unhappy because you're not following your why.
That was Shannon Foreman, and you're listening to episode 175 of the Building Psychological Strength podcast, where we uncover the information, tools, and techniques to turn our mind into our most valuable asset.
The courage to face fears with persistence.
Being able to be present enough in this moment to choose my response thoughtfully.
We have the strength to bend to life stressors, to bend to adversity without snapping, without breaking.
There are only 6 things that contribute to our quality of life, and they are all experiences.
In every moment, we are deciding who we want to be and how we want to live our lives.
Noticing what your brain is doing and then being able to make choices.
Mobilize the things that we know lift us up.
Fear is not logical. It's primal.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Building Psychological Strength podcast. My name is April Seifert and I'm your host. I want to thank you for being here today for this episode. I'm really excited about it. We're going to be diving into a really great topic that impacts every single one of us every single day of our lives. But before we get to that, I want to do a quick listener shout out. I want to say hello and thank you to Austin Bell for your iTunes review that you left. It is titled Absolutely Inspiring, and it says, "These podcasts are little gems packed with the insights of wisdom and self-compassion. April does the deep dive with her guests, and the results reveal the sorrow and joy of what it means to be human, fully living and fully loving. Nourishment for one's heart." Thank you so much, Austin Bell, for that review. Thank you for everyone who has left a rating or a review on iTunes. If you haven't done so yet, please do. It's amazing how much that helps us with the reach of the podcast. There's something I want to call out with that review. I can never help myself. I always have to dive in a little bit. In that review, Austin Bell talks about the insight of self-compassion. Self-compassion is one of the quickest things that you can get out of learning about psychological concepts, because what you quickly learn when you learn about things like automatic thought patterns and the way that emotions happen and our bias toward negativity and confirmation biases and just other natural, just underlying ways that our minds work. When you learn about those, what you quickly come to realize is that a lot of the problems we run into in our day-to-day life, they are not the result of us being weak or deficient or wrong or somehow not good enough in some way or another. They're not some fault of ours. A lot of the things that we're running into psychologically, whether it's anxiety or just lack of confidence or stress and how we're managing it, issues inside relationships and communication, a lot of that can be traced back to basic processes that pretty much amount to the fact that if you're having this experience, it means you're a human with a brain. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not a horrible person. It just means you are a human with a brain. So have a little bit of compassion for yourself that you, because you're a human who was given the brain that we all have, you're doing the best you can with the hardware you've been given. And there are some things that we can do to upgrade that hardware. And that's why we're here on the Building Psychological Strength podcast, because there are fundamental things that we can do to build up the mental well-being and the mental strength that we have within our own minds to live the life that we want to live. So thank you so much for that review. I appreciate it more than I can even describe. And thank you to everyone who's ever left a rating and a review on iTunes. All right, let's start to dig into this week's episode. This week, we are speaking with a dear friend of mine named Shannon Foreman. She recently left her corporate job to start her own independent financial planning firm. And it's kind of funny because, why are we going to be talking about money on Building Psychological Strength? What it boils down to is that there are a number of topics that we find off limits to some degree. I mean, think about it. Go walk up to a random stranger in public and ask them how much money they make. People get uncomfortable really quickly. We also get really uncomfortable when we think about the notion of building wealth and what does that mean for me if I'm the type of person who's trying to build wealth? Does that make me does that make me greedy? Does that make me a bad person? Oh my gosh, am I asking for too much, more than my share? There's a lot of beliefs around the topic of money, and the idea of a belief and what it is and where they come from and how they operate in our lives is one that is a very fundamental, fundamental topic inside the field of psychology, as is self-identity. There's a lot wrapped up in the way that we think about money that is wrapped up in our own identity. I'm the type of person who, what? Do you make a lot of money? I'm the type of person who has a job that is really high paying. Our identities will start to dictate by putting barriers around, and think about bumper bowling, right? It's going to set up the bumpers through which you're going to roll that ball. It sets up the bumpers that we run up against as we think about the moves we're going to make and the goals that we're going to set and whether or not we're ultimately going to achieve them. So we talk about things like beliefs and self-identity in this episode with Shannon, and it's really in the context of a topic, wealth building and money, that impacts all of us on a day-to-day basis. We have an amazing conversation as well about meaning and purpose, how meaning and purpose should play a role in the way that we think about building wealth and the reason behind why we're trying to accumulate wealth and what we're trying to do with it. Over and above, this is just an incredible conversation with a very thoughtful woman who really thinks holistically about financial planning. And so I'm excited to bring this episode to you. One thing that I want to plug before we dive in is also that inside the Peak Mind Center, we have a free product. Now, I'll be honest, this product has been called the Starter Pack in the past. It might have changed names by the time this episode goes live because we're in the process of rebranding a bit of our site. But look for our absolutely free product. Inside that product is something called the Self-Identity Diagnostic. The reason why we created that diagnostic is for purposes like this, where you can go in and figure out how your self-identity might be impacting you in these different areas of your life, including your approach to building wealth or your thoughts about money. Our self-identity is one of the most impactful, influential factors in how we're going to behave, because you will not behave, or you're very much less likely to behave in a way that goes against who you at your core believe that you are. And I highlight that word believe because you can change your beliefs. It's not necessarily accurate. It's just something you believe. So I really would encourage you to, as you're listening to this episode, think about your own self-identity and how that might be wrapped up in some of the beliefs you have about money and the way that you tend to approach this aspect of life. I would also encourage you to go get yourself into that free product on the Peak Mind Center and do the full self-identity diagnostic. It is absolutely revealing to see the way that your identity might be impacting your behavior in so many areas of your life, whether it's romantic relationships or speaking your mind or your physical health or financial health. There's so many things in there. We made it holistic because we want you to see the vast impact that your identity has. I'll also plug, if you're into this notion of beliefs, we have a paid course on the Peak Mind Center that is called Limitless, and this specifically targets self-limiting beliefs. So if you're the type of person who wants to set big goals, but finds yourself holding yourself back and finds yourself limiting or doubting or not believing that you could achieve amazingly huge, astounding things, this course is for you, because we go through the science of how beliefs are formed, and then we use that exact science of how they were formed in the first place to tear down those self-limiting beliefs and put empowering ones in their place. So I would encourage you to check out those couple of resources if you're into the type of thing that we talk about in this episode. All right, guys, I have chatted long enough. I'm really excited for you to meet my dear, dear friend, Shannon Foreman, and to put on or try on a new way of thinking about wealth building that is much more holistic than you might have done in the past. All right, let's roll that interview. Shannon, I'm so excited to have you here. We have been hanging out for a bit now, and you are just phenomenal. And I know my audience is going to learn a ton from you. So welcome, welcome, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for allowing me to be here.
Yay.
I mean,
Yay.
You and I have known each other for a little over a year, and it's fun to just be here. I've listened to the podcast for so long, so I'm excited to be on the podcast.
That's awesome. Well, you have expertise in an area that impacts all of us, financial planning, money, wealth building, all this stuff. And I say it that way because these are topics that are very multifaceted for people, right? Like we need money to survive. We need money to do the things that we want to do, to contribute in the way that we want to contribute, to have the experiences we want to have. The list goes on. However, this topic is one that is heavy and complex for some people. Why is that? What do you hear? Like, you work with a lot of different people. Why is that? And what do you hear from folks that you work with? Like, why is this so complex and heavy for us?
Well, honestly, a lot of it comes from what we were taught as kids, and what our parents teach us and what society teaches us, and how we translate that into what we're worthy of. So I do this activity with clients when I first start with them, like, what were you taught about money as a child? How were you raised? Did you have to worry about money when you were a kid? Did you not have to worry about money when you were a kid? And then that starts off this like grand conversation around things we carry with us. We have no idea we are actually carrying with us. And so like deep down inside, we have mindset or psychologies that are built, right, of things that our parents taught us or experiences that we have. You know, even for myself, I grew up with next to nothing. You know, we've talked about this before. I remember showing up to the fridge and not having food in the fridge. Call it the girl with the empty fridge. That's my child inside. But then I always worried about money, like not having enough or not being worthy of it because my parents told me people with money were bad, right? So all of these things that we hear throughout our life, whether or not we're told them by people we love or society tells us them, especially for women. I mean, how many times, I mean, I was never told this, but I hear it all the time, marry a rich man. Like that's your past, right? And that's just not an acceptable answer. How do we teach our young people to have a different mindset? So I think a lot of it just comes from the past aspect of what we have been taught.
I totally agree. There's so many of those things. Like we talk a lot on this show about beliefs, which at their most basic, a belief, from like a psychological perspective, a belief is just a thought pattern that has become more habitual about a topic, like a set of thoughts about a topic that have become very involuntary or very habitual. And our belief system is formed by just, in a straightforward way or in a more gray area sort of way, hearing the same things over and over about a topic. And what's funny is people who are on Instagram or social media or anywhere these days have probably seen a lot of bloggers and other people talk about money mindset. And that's awesome. I always love when like important topics get to be more mainstream. People are talking about them a lot, but that also tends to make, it can cheapen them, or it can sort of dilute out how important that topic is and how many ways that it manifests in our lives that we might not even be realizing it. So like, can you give a concrete example? So this idea of lack, right? Again, this is everywhere. You need to have an abundance mindset, this lack mindset, right? Like I'm just spouting off the Instagram memes, but there's a reason why it's getting traction. It's because there's something there. Can you give some concrete examples of if you had that belief system similar to what you did, and we had a very similar situation where I also had those as well, around there's never going to be enough. I'm always, I don't have enough. There's not enough out there. how does that manifest in people's lives in a way that they would actually see, like a way that they can think, oh my God, I do that. Like, I can't believe this. I would love for you to give just a concrete example.
Well, I think what I see the most is hoarding money sometimes, right? Like, we're talking right now and there's a lot of volatility in the market, but people keep cash on the side longer because they need a security net. And it actually may not help them in terms of their financial future or building wealth because they're trying to have that security net or security blanket, whichever you choose, a net or a blanket, whatever's floats your boat. But then I also see it being a block. And for me personally, it was about my income. And I had this block that I wasn't worth making the same amount of money or, more than other people because my parents didn't make that much money. And as soon as I reset, and it was in my early 20s when I decided that I wanted to be a financial planner and advisor, that I said, I'm going to make six figures by the time I'm 30. And to other people, that was crazy. They were like, why would you set that goal for yourself? Well, because I put that on a piece of paper, because I said that that was something that I wanted to do, by 28, I was doing it. And so if we remove some of those barriers for ourselves, even because when I first wrote it down, I thought I was crazy. Let's be real. It still felt very crazy. There are goals that I write down now that I'm like, whoa, these are mind blowing. But I know that I'm worth that. And now, I have the ability to do so much more. And I'm a firm believer that, you start to talk about the money mindset. It's great we're talking about it, but we also need to take it to the next step of what are actionable items that actually make us successful. So I started looking at careers and jobs that were going to actually get me to the goal that gave me financial freedom, that I still love doing and still fulfilled my soul, because I'm not willing to compromise that aspect of things, right? But you have to take actionable item. You can't just live and say, in this position and say, I want abundant wealth, right? You have to take actionable items or actionable steps to get there.
Totally agree. And something that you mentioned around my parents didn't make a lot of money, and so I didn't think that I could make a lot of money. We have a free product in the Peak Mind Center. And inside that product is something called a self-identity diagnostic. There's a section of it, and it's basically what are all these different components that go together to form your personal identity? And one of those pieces is financial. And we ask questions like, are you the type of person who money comes to really easily? Are you the type of person who makes a lot of money? And if you answer no to those types of things, just think about this. Think of somebody you really dislike, somebody you really you don't respect them as a person. Mm-hmm. Are you ever going to let yourself be like that person? Probably not. If you think that people who are building wealth actively and intentionally, their goal is to make money, to do whatever it is with it, right? Their goal is to do that. If you think they are bad people, do you think psychologically you will ever allow yourself to be like those people?
Absolutely
Probably not. No. Because we're protective against stuff like that, right? We psychologically protect ourselves. So what you're talking about is self-identity. And this goes across the board, our behavior. One of the modules, one of the modules that we talk about a lot within Peak Mind is habit change. And the way that we change ingrained behavior. Fundamentally, one of the biggest drivers of our behavior is our own identity. I'm the type of person who, what? Are you the type of person who exercises a lot? Are you the type of person who eats healthy foods or no? Are you the type of person who loves chocolate? Are you the type of person who adores wine? If you are, those are probably behaviors that you're going to do more often than ones that don't align. And money is one of those things. You will subtly sabotage yourself in ways that, our minds are sneaky, man. They are convincing.
Powerful things.
Right?
Yes. You can literally so Jim and I just remodeled our whole house. HGTV'd the heck out of it.
And you lived through it. Those big remodels are brutal.
But when we first bought this house, we would have never believed that we could have done the project that we just did. And instead, we put together and said, instead of saying, we can't do this, we won't ever have enough money to do this, we changed how we talk to ourselves and talk to each other. And we said, we will do this someday. We are going to save this much money. We are going to do this. And the great part of what we both do, I mean, I love helping people, but I also work in a sales environment, and so does my husband, right? I mean, there's selling to every part of our job. Now I sell responsibly in my space. That's a whole nother topic we could talk about. But we have the ability to control our income too. That was one thing that really helped me psychologically move through. And I know that a lot of your listeners maybe are business owners and have the ability to run their own business. You also have the ability to grow your income to be whatever you want it to be. It just depends on how much you're willing to put in the effort to get to that place, right? There isn't a ceiling for income when you're an entrepreneur or when you're in sales. You have the ability to, grow your business to a place that's going to give you that financial freedom. Whereas if you work in a corporate job and you move up those ladders, you're at a salary gap, right? Or a salary
ceiling. Yeah.
Thank you. So you don't have the same likelihood. You're tied a little bit more than the freedom that entrepreneurial or sales gives individuals.
Totally. Something I'm curious about. So again, going back to this notion of, money and wealth, we've unpacked one of the sources of yuck around it, right? Just the way that we've been taught to view it. You're greedy, you're asking for too much. Don't you have enough? At some point, isn't it enough? Like, don't spend it. Money doesn't grow on trees. All those things that we've been ingrained to believe. All of that makes it a convoluted topic, psychologically, just a yucky hard one to be totally official about it, a yucky hard one to deal with. But there are others. And I want to move us to another stage of this because this is really critical. Money can feel just, even if you're past that point where you're like, yep, I'm worth it. Yep, this isn't bad of me. Great, let's do it. And you're like, game on. Then you start to look at Roth, IRA, 401k, what about stocks? What about index? What's that? And fully things that are actively managed. No, wait, what's a mutual fund? Hang on, where do I start? But what if I lose it all? But this coronavirus thing is happening right now and the stock market is low. Oh my God. It all feels like all the cattle are out of the barn and running everywhere. It feels like too much to get your arms around to try to understand it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I feel like that's another reason why people don't get in this game, because it just feels too big and scary and complicated.
Yeah. And I think there is so much, and there isn't a lot, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, there isn't a lot of clarity from our industry to make it tangible for somebody that doesn't live in our space to understand, right? It's like reading a doctor's note and not understanding some things, right? You can read all of these things on the internet, but does that apply to me? How does that apply to me? And that's why I think it's so important to sit down with someone, right? To be able to have a conversation with a financial advisor or a planner and voice your concerns. Those individuals, if you sit down with a good one, are going to lead with education, are going to lead with goals, are going to lead with making sure that you understand before there's ever a product that is brought to the table, right? What are the actual strategies that you should be doing? So if you're a small business owner, what type of retirement should you have? Because that's going to be different than somebody that has a corporate job, right? There are a lot of different options. How do you structure that? Is it a solo 401k? Is it a SEP IRA? Which way do you go? If you have employees, do you do a plan that allows your employees to have something in there? And each individual has a different, it's not like you can go to the water cooler and everybody drinks the same water, right? It's a very personal, I say this all the time, your financial situation is as personal as your DNA. you should be making sure that the decisions that you make with your finances are specific to your picture. You and I aren't going to have the same, we both own our own businesses, but we're not going to have the same financial structures, right? We're not going to have the same financial goals. So the products and solutions that we have shouldn't be the same necessarily either. And if it's not your forte, just like me building my house was not my forte, I didn't know what to pick out, right? So I went to a professional. I hired a contractor to be able to organize all of that for me and be able to explain what was going to be happening, the stages of how everything was going to go through. And if you don't have that team, I think it's very important, especially in times like now that we're talking about volatility and things happening. You need somebody that's going to explain that for you and have a conversation with you. We as women sometimes want to take it all on ourselves too. And I don't know about you, April. Do you have a cape?
I have like a little baby one that I run around with my daughters with, but like, no, on a general basis, not really. No.
Yeah, not one that isn't like a child superhero one, because I do the same thing too.
Yeah.
Because we're cool moms. And but we don't have one, right? And so we have to really be able to build that team around us of professionals who are going to support us. And I think it's important that people have that and self-recognition that maybe this isn't my jam. I can't do it.
I agree. And what's interesting is, as I became an entrepreneur, which it opens up, you're right, it does open up a lot of flexibility and a lot more options, but with that flexibility and options comes more options for you to have to try to figure out. It became infinitely more important for us. And as you earn more and have more options, you'll see that this happens. As you have kids and more responsibilities, your set of options and what you need to be considering changes, right? So throughout our life, these options change. And it's interesting because you can approach this domain that's very yucky, that we've talked about, or can feel yucky and gray and hard. It, in a matter of days of just getting the right person in place and having the right initial conversations where you really feel heard and feel like your individual situation is being taken into account, you can go from that very gray, sort of fearful, anxious place to feeling, and this is how I feel about our financial planner, I feel very taken care of. Mm-hmm. I feel like that person is taking care of me, and not just me, but again, as I think about my girls, there are financial products that we have in place specifically because of them, and planning that's in place in the event of a myriad of different things that could happen that will financially, I say, like, there's a group of people there who are going to catch them if they need it.
Yep.
And that's like the most calming, comforting feeling.
Absolutely. And that's what it should be. That's the relationship you should have with your advisor. Someone that is going to understand the emotions that come with things and what makes you tick, right? Making sure your kids are taken care of is what is the most, the utmost important to you, right? Mm-hmm. And understanding the strategies that are going to get you to that place and explaining them to you in a way that is going to help you understand what that benefit gets to your goal. And that's where I think that our industry can get a little convoluted sometimes, and that doesn't always happen for individuals. And so I really founded Forethought Planning on the aspect of, we're going to look at your whole life. We're not just going to look at the money side of things. We're going to look at how it touches every place of your life, the relationships that you have with your family, with your spouse, your partner, your kids, your parents, because that's like a whole nother financial situation too. But the emotional, the psychological, the behavioral things that also come with that, how it affects your health, your mental and your physical health. We're going to talk about all of those things so that we have a better understanding of how that implicates you and how we can really put together strategy that is going to benefit you in all of those areas, right? Because if you don't have strength around your financial picture, what does that look like for your mental health? What does that look like for your physical health? How does that affect your relationships? divorce rates are really high in our country. And, what are some of the number one causes in that? Money, unfortunately. So being able to have open communication and education around that is something I think is very important.
Well, and I love, we've touched on this a bit, and you're diving into this next area that I want to go is around, I think sometimes, and this is how I used to approach it as well, there was like this equation in my head. Like there's got to be an equation that's like the quote right way to do this, right? Like somewhere out there's the right allocation and the right order in which I should pay off debt versus save this thing versus do this thing versus whatever. And all of that started to change at one point when I had I didn't even end up working with this person because I couldn't afford it at the time. And I wasn't at like the same position that I'm in today. But one of the very first financial planners that I spoke to, I said, I don't know. I'm not sure what to do. Should I pay off my student loan debt, or should I work more toward this other goal that I had? And this person looked at me and said, how are you sleeping at night? And which one of those is keeping you up at night? What he didn't say was, well, the interest rate on this one is higher versus your earning rate on this other thing, blah, blah, blah. Like that would have been the equation. But for me, he was more like, unless it's a big swing one way or the other, let's get you in a place where you feel secure, where we can just take some of this off your plate and put it to bed. Because, right, we all have enough in our mind. We all have enough. We've got that list of things in our mind that we're already like running through on a day-to-day basis. We've got enough to keep track of. So this is my long-winded way of saying, I really think, and from what I've seen from the way that you approach it, your personal values and not only your goals, but like your values, what you care about and what you stand for in your life should play into this. And we know from psychology that is a very big cornerstone of psychological well-being, is knowing what that set of values are. And then when things get yucky, continuing to come back to them as a grounding place and a place to find your way out. How does that play into just financial planning and how you work with your clients and how people should think about their own wealth building and financial future?
Oh, purpose is so huge. Values are so huge in what it is that you do. What is one person's angst or thing that keeps them up at night is different than another person, right? And so if having debt is uncomfortable for you, like it literally gives you anxiety, then you need to deal with that, right? We need to create a plan. We need to be able to execute on that. If having a car loan doesn't keep you up at night, then paying it off is maybe not the strategy that you should take, right? It's all around how do you feel? I have this, I instead of asking my clients, how are they doing? I ask them, how are they feeling? Because I think it starts a different conversation. How are you doing is superficial. Oh, I'm okay, right? You get the answer, okay. How are you feeling? Well, what is happening inside for you? What is that goal? So if your goal is to send your children to college, how will that make you feel? What is the impact there for you? If you want to pass on generational wealth to your children or your grandchildren, what do you want that to look like? We spend a lot of time creating visions with my clients of how they want that. What do they want to be remembered by? Okay, if you leave this great lump sum of money, what does that do and why? You can have 10%, 12% rate of return on your portfolio, but why? What do you need that for? What is the purpose of that? I think a lot of times, that's a perfect example. I'll get people who come in and they're like, I want double-digit returns. Oh, okay. First of all, anybody that's going to promise you double-digit returns, you should turn around and walk right out of the office, because it's just not realistic. We can't promise those types of things. But why? Why do you think that you need to have that? Do you think that that's what you have to have in order to retire? Do you think that that's what you have to have in order for your goals to happen? Let's sit down and have more of the why conversation so we can get to the how conversation.
I love that, because so much around, and we talk about this in just basic psychological well-being, again, because it can be you need something to attach that behavior to. It isn't enough to just have the behavior be its own thing. It has to be serving some sort of underlying purpose, because at some point things are going to get hard. It's going to be your best of intentions. And for people who have been in that situation where you've wanted to do something like behaviorally, maybe habit changing, let's go back to that again. You've wanted to institute a better habit or get rid of a one that you think isn't as good for you, or you want to save money in a particular way or whatever. At some point things get hard and you mess up, like you slip up. It's not, what doesn't work long term in those situations is you turning on the wagging finger and beating yourself up for making a mistake. Mm-hmm. It doesn't help for you to start yelling at yourself after you've made a mistake. But what does help is to say, okay, that happened. Let me go back to the whole reason why I started this in the first place. Because that reason, there's grounding there. Mm-hmm. And no matter what road you've taken from there, it always brings you back to that home base. Mm-hmm. Where you can start again on solid footing. So I love that you start at that place with your clients. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, when we start with goals and the why behind those goals, then it makes them much more achievable, so that when it's evident that the market is going to fluctuate, we know that life transitions are going to happen. We can control some of those things and we can't control others. And so that's why I want to help clients understand the why. I also want them to understand that we need to be proactive for some things that we can plan for, and then we need to build resilience for the other things. And I didn't always start with this holistic piece of everything, but because I started in my own personal journey, my clients started to realize it. I've always talked to them about why, but building in that self-care and the resilience and the proactivity became much more of a conversation because my clients saw me doing it. And so as I was a model for them, they wanted the same things. And so then it became greater discussion about what can we do to make sure that your comprehensive life is better. So if you want to, that's why I ask them, like, do you have a fitness goal? Do you have a personal development goal? Do you have a professional goal that you're working towards that you want to achieve? How are those things going to make you feel? What do we need to do from a financial standpoint to get you there? Because at the end of the day, you could have millions of dollars and be completely unhappy because you're not following your why.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And it's, everybody's heard about those studies around, people winning the lottery and how short-lived that, positive emotion is. Positive emotion is fleeting. There's, again, to bring this back to some basic psychology stuff, so Martin Seligman is kind of the OG of positive psychology. He developed all of the foundational stuff for the part of the field that focuses not just on making you better when you're sick, but making you thrive even if you're doing okay. Mm-hmm. That field is just incredible. And he developed something called the PERMA factors, which are the 5 factors that predict psychological well-being the most. And positive emotion is one of them. That's what the P is. It is definitely part of it. If you didn't experience any happiness or any joy in your life, you wouldn't feel very fulfilled. Mm-hmm. However, what the M is meaning. And this goes back to, I'll give a funny example. So meaning is like having a purpose that's bigger than yourself. Finding meaning in something that is more than just you and more than just superficial things. This goes back to why people continue to have kids and psychologically do well, even though their level of stress is reported as higher after they have kids and their level of positive emotion is lower. Psychological well-being is not the same as positive emotion, but that sense of meaning is what buffers people when they have kids. Even though they're stressed out, they're not as quote unquote happy, it is so much, every moment of their life is more meaningful. And I bring all that up because when you think about what money can do, so let's think about that why, and I would invite this audience to think about this, what's the big impact in the world, and size the definition of the world in, however you want to, whether it's just the example you want to be for your kid, whether it is the financial safety net you want to leave behind, whether it's the generational wealth and opportunity you want to build, whether it's the nonprofit you want to start, the cause you want to fund and get behind. All of those things are things that having wealth and being able to do something beyond just paying your bills can buy. But some of the basic things that you've talked about, Shannon, that doesn't happen until those things are taken care of, until those belief systems are moved, until that identity is accepting of this new aspect of you. Only then, and I'm totally soapboxing right now, but I can't help it. There's, our minds are so good at looking for things. They're not good at looking at them. They're good at looking for goals. They're good at looking for, this is why word finds are really fun. We're good at looking for patterns in different types of data. You have to give your mind a goal and give it something to look for. And giving it a clear picture of what you're chasing, your mind is like this amazing filter, and it will filter through stuff that aligns with that goal. I love your approach to this.
Yeah, I would also say too, with a relationship with money, making it a tool in your toolbox, separating the fact of money being gross or icky or, it is a tool for you to be able to make the difference that you want to in your lives. And I know most of your audience is women, and I will say this, there is more wealth transitioning from previous generations to women. There are more beneficiaries that are women. And I'm not hating on our men friends, but women have the tendency to give more and be more giving when it comes financially. What does that mean for our world when women are going to be in control of more of the wealth? Don't view that as a burden. View that as an opportunity to make and create lasting change that could, when you look at that meaning, for me, it is my girls. And I think about, wow, my kids are never going to have to be that girl looking in the empty fridge. I'll be darned if they ever have to look for food in my house. And I will work to make sure that happens, and I will be present for them. At the same time, I know what I have to give up to other people to do. And I know that money is a tool for me to be able to exercise and do the things that I need to do in my life to get to the place that I am. I didn't always believe that. I had to get through all of that negative belief system to say, money is great. I want all of it so that I can create change. I write goals down every single day, and I write those goals down, and there's a deeper goal behind it and a deeper why. I want this goal because I want to be able to do this with that goal. And a lot of those goals have to do with money. And it's because I want to create a greater impact and have a greater why. I mean, that's really why I left, the corporate financial standpoint and opened my own firm, because I want to change. And I have a real purpose behind how I want to create that change for other people too.
I love that. As we're closing out today, I'm wondering if we can just talk action steps. There's probably a variety of people who are listening to this. There's probably people who are new to the game, have not gotten into the pool yet. There's probably people too who are in and are like, I've never thought about money in this way before. So consider for us a moment, you've got people who maybe they're invested, maybe they aren't, but they are new to thinking about money in the way that you're describing it. What are some just action steps that people can take to start to think more holistically about their financial future in the way that we've been talking about?
Sure. I actually do this in one of the workshops that I do around money. And just to get through some of this mindset piece is to take a piece of paper and write down all of your negative views on money that you have or that you've been taught, and rip it up. Like I have people do that at the beginning of my workshop. There's something so freeing. And if you want to set it on fire, sure, please do it in a responsible fashion. But like ripping it up, there's something freeing about getting rid of that, right? I know that that won't totally get rid of everything from a belief standpoint, but that's something that you can do to at least get that out of, like, free it from your mind, right? I have so many songs coming in my head about freeing. This is what happens inside my psychological brain, songs. And then I would say, you know, after you've freed yourself, really educate yourself. And there's so much education out there. I post a daily forethought every day on Facebook and LinkedIn to educate yourself around money. So if you're just starting out, start to understand, as simple as it is, your cash flow, what comes in, what goes out, and be really thoughtful about what is coming in and what is going out and where is it going and where could you be saving. Pay yourself first, people, before you go buy that hot, shiny thing, before you go on vacation, before you do those other things. Pay yourself first. We are of generations now where we will not have pension plans. If you don't know what that is, you won't have one anyway, so don't worry about it. But previously, a lot of people didn't have to save for their retirement. Well, guess what? You will, and no one's saving for it for you besides yourself. So please make sure that you understand the ins and outs of your, like, remedially, I don't call it a budget. I call it cash flow. What comes in, what goes out. And then if you're in the game and you've been there and you're investing, but you don't have a plan and you don't have a person that's giving you that, find a person that is. If you're looking for one, I mean, obvious plug, I'm going to plug myself, and I'm, happy to help you with that. But find somebody, it doesn't have to be me, find somebody that's going to educate you. Find somebody that's going to empower you to make decisions around your goals. And if you're really that far down the road and you have people, make sure you're revisiting your goals on a regular basis and you're in line and your investments are in line with what you feel comfortable with. This is not what your advisor feels comfortable with. You and your partner may have different, risk tolerances, but make sure that you're comfortable with what it is and that you understand what the implications that are happening big picture wise, how they'll affect you. I've been saying this a lot lately with the amount of fluctuation in the market. Just because the Dow and the S&P 500 do this doesn't mean your portfolio does. So don't panic. Have the education to understand what it's doing. So rip up your money goals or your money beliefs, not your goals. Rip up your money beliefs, understand your cash flow, have a team, and revisit your goals.
Those are so actionable. I love that so much. Something that this audience might not realize, and as we segue into the question that I ask everybody, and I'm really excited to hear your answer, something that people might not know about you is that you're actually, you do financial planning, right? But you're insanely well read in the space of life design, of personal development, of all of those great, amazing things. And I bring that up because I'm really excited to hear the way that you would define psychological strength.
Yeah. Oh, this has been a journey for me throughout my entire life, as you know. I define psychological strength as resilience in my life to be able to withstand the crap that will get thrown at me, because I know my life is not easy. I own my own business. I have 2 kids. I have a wonderful husband. I have a dad who lives with Alzheimer's. I have codependent parents. I have to be psychologically strong. It's not a choice for me. So I have to build resilience. I have to take care of myself. So I have a routine in order to do that. And so for me, psychological strength is having a self-care routine, not just on a Sunday and not in a bathtub with bubbles. It is like working out, showing myself that physically my body can do things I never thought I was mentally capable of, which then creates the strength for me to be able to take on the day and do things that are really hard that not everybody is cut out to do. And I believe I was called to do that. And so that's where I build my strength.
That's awesome. Something I can't let this go because I'm planning on doing an episode fully devoted to this. So I'm just going to give a quick little plug because you just set it up so beautifully. So many times as, people who have a lot of competing responsibilities on their plate, you named a lot, and the people who are listening to this probably were nodding at a number of them. I have a lot of similar ones, some different, whatever, but we've all got a lot of competing responsibilities. It can be easy to think I don't have the time or space in my life to take care of myself. I love the way that you described it around, you're basically saying like, you are the linchpin here. You are one of the most important people in that entire ecosystem of everyone else because you're the support for 90% of what's happening. And if you're not strong, if you're not rock solid, the whole house starts to waver, right? Everything starts to fall apart. So I talk with my husband about this a lot. That 30 minutes that you might take for yourself will pay dividends in hours of just better capability on your part. When you are the person who everybody and everything depends on, it's not a matter of, I love that you dogged on bubble baths because I like them, but they are not, for me, they are not self-care. They do not, bubble baths do not help me win at life. Ever. They just don't. They're very nice, but they don't help me win at life. The things that I do, though, in my own self-care routine are exactly as you're saying. They're the things that let me be the rock solid pillar that's holding everything else up. And so I'm planning on doing an entire episode on this because it's such an important topic, but I couldn't leave without hitting that a little bit more because I love the way you described it. As we close out today, tell people where they can find you because you've got this amazing approach to wealth building and financial planning that is not common to find in the industry. And if people are interested in starting to wade into that pool, I would love for them to know where to find you.
Yeah, so a couple of different places. So from a financial regulatory perspective, since I am a licensed individual, you can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm just Shannon Foreman, or you can follow Forethought Planning on LinkedIn or on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. I don't post about money there. That's where I post about like self-care, resilience, all that jazz. I'm MS Shannon Foreman on Instagram. I will also say I do free discovery calls with clients to decide where it is that they might fit. I also have 3 pillars of service to meet people where they are in their financial life. So whether you're just starting out or you've accumulated wealth and have had substantial wealth throughout your years, I have pillars of service to serve. And you can follow us on forethoughtplanning.com/discovery to schedule an appointment with us there. But I do post hashtag daily forethought every day. So there's a financial topic that I talk about every day, and it usually has to do with some type of mental, physical wellness so that we can make sure that that's encompassing our whole financial health and wellness as well.
I love it. Shannon, this has been awesome. I'm so excited that we've had a chance to sit down and talk and to dig into some of these topics that they're psychological in nature. They impact people's financial lives, but ultimately it is, both of these are foundational aspects that impact how our day-to-day life is experienced, what we're able to do, how fully we're living. So it's just been great to sit down and chat with you and dive into these awesome topics. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you. I feel like we could talk all day about this.
I know. It's been awesome. It's a simple fact that nearly everyone in the world could benefit from building psychological strength, but not everyone will put in the time and effort to do so. But today you did. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Building Psychological Strength. Now, if you're interested in building the mental toughness, confidence, and resilience you need to thrive through life's ups and downs, visit us at www.peakmindpsychology.com. Also, if there's someone in your life who could benefit from this episode, please share it with them. And if you yourself found this episode valuable, meaning if you took away even one insight that you can use to build psychological strength in your own life, we would so appreciate it if you would drop us a rating and a review on iTunes. The thing is, the more ratings and reviews we have, the easier it is to get this powerful and important content out to the people who need to hear it. Remember, your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. So choose wisely, my friend. And I'll see you next time on Building Psychological Strength.